lot of us come from B2B software companies, tech companies, where we're working in sales and service, customer support, customer success roles. I wanted to bring on a really product-oriented company. So we actually have Evernote, the CEO of Evernote, Phil Libin. So I want to introduce Phil. Please, round of applause for Phil Libin. Hey. What's up, man? Have a seat.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Phil. Really, yeah, that's a little whoopee cushion in the chair. It just kind of keeps the humor going. Very strange. But it's an absolute honor to have you here. So actually, show of hands, how many people use Evernote in the audience? Yeah. Oh, my God. Wow. That is awesome.
Thank you.
That must feel good.
Actually, it feels better when if I'm in Europe or something and this question comes up and it's maybe only like a third of the audience, because that is our growth opportunity. I actually get a little bit nervous when I see
when a lot of people are using it.
But that's just the San Francisco thing. Actually, in most of the world, most people have never heard of Evernote, so we still have some room.
Awesome. Great. So I got a few different things I want to talk about, then we'll open up to questions in the audience. So first kind of theme is, if we want to transform companies to be more focused on customers and customer success, a big lever is culture. And I think you guys have thought about that a lot. So tell us about the Evernote culture in general, and then specifically how you think about your customers.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I think we made Evernote specifically so that we can make products for us to use and to make a company that we wanted to keep. We kind of intentionally said 100-year startup. We don't want to sell. We don't want to make products that are for other people. We really want to make products that we understand. And the culture is just part of that. The Evernote culture is the first expression of the product, and vice versa. I think when you when you take any product and you kind of hold it up to the light and you turn it in a certain way, you can see the reflection of the company that made the product in the product, and you really can't hide that reflection. And if you want to make a beautiful product, the only way to do it is to make sure that's reflecting something beautiful. So there's no shortcuts to it. That's how we think about it.
How do you reinforce that on a kind of daily basis in terms of like when you have a customer situation that comes up? What goes through your mind in terms of how it becomes a teaching moment for the company?
It's mostly through the ever-present threat of physical violence.
I would be scared. Yeah.
Mostly.
That's exactly. Especially the pink elephants on the shirt. That's intimidating.
Yeah. Again, there's no real trick. It's just so we cheat, right? The way that we cheat is we make products that we love, and we only make products that we love, and we don't make anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. In fact, that's how we know if we make a feature and it's kind of a bust, is we know that if we're not using it ourselves. And most companies don't have that luxury. Most companies, probably even in this room, are making something that isn't entirely for them. They're making something for a different customer base, and it's much harder when you do that, because if you're not making it for yourself, how do you know when it's really great? You have to know indirectly, and we cheat. We only make things that we ourselves love, and so we can just by being honest with ourselves, we know if it's going right, if it's going wrong, and that's the secret to everything. But I'm not exactly sure how to extend that. If we were making, obviously not everyone can make things only for themselves, because if you did that, there'd be no one would make baby diapers. Right?
That's an interesting visual. I like that. That's totally right.
So someone's got to do it. Just doesn't have to be us.
So you've got a team. Let's start with your core business, individual business. You've got a team that's obviously dealing with a lot of the customer issues that come up, and then you have a separate team, I think, or a separate initiative around the business customers. Is that right?
Yeah, and we're actually moving those closer and closer together. So both on the product side and on the support side, we're really combining those. So everything is getting to be one focused group. But we did start out with the more traditional divisions, and now we're smooshing them.
So let's talk about support. So a lot of people deal with support, and actually the volume you must deal with, potentially, I don't know exactly, is probably pretty high. How do you guys think of customer support, and what do you do differently there?
Well, we try to be really good with support. We've actually just recently had a major reinvestment in support, in people and in processes. What I tell the support team is, it's a little bit counterintuitive. I say your number one job of the support organization is not to help customers with their problems. The number one job of the support organization is to make our product better. So if you help a customer with their problem and they love you for it, that feels good and it's nice, but you really just helped one person. And for any customer that actually bothered complaining, there was at least 100, maybe 1,000 that had the same problem that didn't complain. And so if all you did is help the person that complained, you didn't make the product any better, you haven't actually done very much anything scalable. And so the main job of support is to make the product better. Their secondary job is to make customers happy. And that's counterintuitive, because obviously the kinds of people who are drawn to support, who are good at it, they want to make people happy, they want to solve problems. We obviously want to encourage that, but then they have to explicitly understand and be measured on not just how many problems they solve, but by how much are they making the product better. So we're measuring as much on useful feedback that winds up going into the product design cycle as we are by how many cases are resolved.
So it's actually a really good theme to explore. Like, how many of you want to make your own products better in your companies? Like, you have ideas. So, like, I think a lot, me too. I think a lot of people struggle with how do they get their voice heard, right? So they're in customer success, customer support. They're not the actual product manager or the engineer building the feature. How do they get their voice heard at Evernote? And, like, what could these folks learn about how they apply that to their company?
You mean just employees or?
Yeah, how do you, like, if you've got really good feedback that you think matters and you're a customer support, customer success person, how do they get that into the top of the queue of the product manager, engineer working on that particular feature?
It's really, there's no tricks. Again, it's just about, since the products are stuff that we use ourselves, if you can just coherently articulate what you want and what you want to make better, it's going to get heard. We're just not, we're not that big a company yet where we need to have, where the obstacle is people aren't getting heard. If you have a clear idea, you can always just tell me directly. There's probably 50 people in the company, any one of which would immediately, upon hearing a good idea, make it a top priority thing to work on, and we just want people to understand that. So it's just it's a little bit of public reinforcement, and then it takes care of itself. Again, this would be harder if we were making something that wasn't fundamentally for us, because then we'd constantly be having to weigh, market fit.
Yeah.
And since we don't really do that, we don't think in terms of market fit, it's an amazing luxury to not have to do that. So if I was in a company, Evernote was my third startup. My first one, we were making e-commerce software, so we were working for big retailers. That wasn't for us, so we had to think about what do big retailers want. Our second company was making security software for governments and banks, which again wasn't for us, so we had to constantly think about how do we prioritize features that the U.S. government wants or that a big bank wants. And I know how to do that, but I also know that that's super hard, and that's why Evernote explicitly was about, how do we make something where we don't have to do that, where we just have this intuitive feel, and we were much happier because of it.
That's awesome. So now you actually maybe are venturing a little more into understanding business needs, because you have Evernote for Business. How does that change both your product philosophy, if at all, and also just how you staff that organization in terms of sales and customer success potentially down the line?
Well, we've really sharpened our focus a little bit over the past. Our 6-year anniversary is coming up since the launch of the product next month.
So you have 94 years to go.
Yeah, 94 years
exactly.
to go. We have a progress bar. And it's like 5% complete. If you stare at it really long, you can see it. You can see it clearly. But if you stare at it that long, I'll ask you what else you have to do. But the focus really is on work. Like, Evernote is we want to be the modern workspace for modern busy people. Like, we want to be the relevant definition of how you get your work done. And that very much means if you work at a big company, at a big enterprise, like, you have to be able to use Evernote and be super happy with it. And if you're on your own, you have to be able to use Evernote in your personal life or in your small business. So we've focused it on saying it's about work, and our users are people who like to work, who like to be productive, who like to get things done. And obviously that means in big enterprises as well. So the way we're thinking about it is we do 90% of the work on satisfying the end users, like the actual employees in a company who are actually going to be using it. We care about their experience. And we spend 10% of the work satisfying the buyer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the opposite way of how companies who start an enterprise go about it. And we started in consumer, so that came naturally to us. But I think a lot of companies think about the actual people using the product. They get the MVP, they get the minimum viable product, and the guy who's writing the check gets everything that they want. We do it the other way, which is a big gamble, because we're sort of gambling on the fact there's a lot of enlightened IT organizations that know that their job isn't to say no, their job is to make their employees productive, and more of those people adopt Evernote, and that's certainly happening, but it is a dangerous thing. That is a bet we're taking that could backfire on us, but so far so good.
And how does that mean organizationally? Are you hiring salespeople, or hiring customer success, or account managers? And what are you thinking about there? And also, what are you worried about? Because that could change culturally things a little bit.
Yeah, so we are. Up to now, most of our sales, I think something like 90%, were. So when we first launched Evernote Business, this is our business version, about a year and a half ago, we expected about 80% of the sales to come from the sales team and 20% to be self-service. And it's actually the other way around. So it's actually about 90% self-service and about 10% sales touch.
Wow.
Which really just means that we haven't figured out how to sell. So when I saw these numbers, everyone was very happy because we got the in terms of actual sales performance, we were like exactly on plan, but just we achieved it with 90% being self-service. People were like, well, this is great. I'm like, yeah, but really, I'm glad that we hit our numbers, and I'm glad that there's such a big pull-through demand of self-service. But what it really means is that we could have been 10 times bigger had our sales team actually been working the way we thought it would be working. So I took from that the fact that we don't understand how to sell things, which I think is true, and now we're trying to figure it out. So we do have a sales team, and it's getting a lot better, but that is a major thing that we are not yet good at, is understanding that. And I don't have a sales background, and I'm really trying to understand it. And I think in the next 12 months we're going to get really world-class at this, but we're not right now.
Let's go. A few people in the audience could probably help you guys, so that's good. We've all been through those scars. My last question, and then we'll open up the audience. Having built a product-oriented company, a product-focused company, I'm sure you guys have looked at a lot of metrics about your business over time in terms of what people are doing in the product and where they've been successful. I lied, by the way, one more question after this. Where they've been successful, where they haven't, what issues they run into, what features are popular. Tell us about the evolution for that, because actually the B2B world is trying to get more into that analytical view.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think a lot of companies, especially in Silicon Valley, fetishize data a bit too much. I think there's a feeling that like you don't really have to do anything because the data will tell you. Just like plug in Google Analytics and other stuff into enough places, and then just sit back and it'll tell you what to do.
It doesn't do that.
So we went from very much like a cowboy, seat of our pants, like we know what's right, what do we need data for attitude, and that was how we ran it for the first few years. And so all of our product decisions were made by us internally. Like we would get together and we would argue about what to do, and the person with the best thought through and best articulated opinion would wind up winning. And that was usually me. And then that's what we would implement. But then what we realized again is that like that's okay for some things, but for a large class of design problems, it actually doesn't matter what my opinion is because the facts are out there if we were to just to measure them and to look at them. So we've made a very explicit decision about 2 years ago that we said we have to change this DNA. Like we have to get much better at measuring things, and so we have been getting a lot better at it. But in general, I would say there's kind of user feedback is super good at one thing, and it's super bad at something else, and it's important to realize that. And I think like user feedback, and we get a ton of it, user feedback is really, really good at telling you where you screwed up. Like it's really good at telling you what you did wrong, because people are naturally gifted at complaining.
Everyone here understands that.
They're just
they
good
deal
at
with that.
it.
Yeah.
Like everyone is just born as like Olympic level, complainer. And it's super important to take that seriously.
Yeah.
And so like the criticism is really, really valuable, and you can always learn like what you're doing wrong. The recommended fixes are usually not correct because in general people have no great skill at actually fixing things. Some of them do, and when we just passed 100 million users, and now we have 100 million people who've used Evernote. Among those 100 million people, there are some amazing product designers, and so when they tell us what to do, sometimes we're like, oh wow, this is a great idea, and then we try to hire those people. But for the most part, like suggestions aren't useful, but criticism is super useful. So like praise isn't that useful, suggestions aren't that useful, criticism is super useful. Luckily, criticism is what's in the great abundance, and so you just have to deal with how to process it without without being suicidal.
That's definitely tweet-worthy. So last question, for real. If you Google your name, and you probably know this, like there are lots of great articles, and then many people have said that you had one of the most epically positive, open, authentic responses to a customer situation like that anyone's ever seen. Do you mind telling the story about, I think it was, last year sometime?
It was this year.
This year, okay.
I think, if this is what you're referring to. There was the Jason Kincaid article.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So, no, this was just a very unpleasant thing. There was an article that Jason Kincaid wrote. He was a blogger. He used to write for TechCrunch, and he just wrote an article about how, look, he's been using Evernote forever, and he was in love with it, but frankly, he felt over the past year like it just gotten kind of buggy and bloated, and there was all these things wrong with it, and it was just a very negative review, and there was a lot of comments. It was on Hacker News, and there was a big thread, and there was a lot of people chiming in, and it sucked. It was very painful. I take all that stuff very personally. I think we all do, because again, we're making something for us. There's no way not to take it personally. And it came out on my birthday, so that was great.
Oh, jeez.
Wow. But I read it, and the thing was like it was it resonated with me. Like it rang true. Like there were things that he said which I would quibble with, which were wrong, but like for the most part, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like this feels true to me, and so I wrote a response basically saying that and saying, yeah, like we a couple of months ago we had an internal set of meetings, and I said, look, things feel like they're getting a little bit big and bloaty, so let's like focus in the next 6 months on quality. And we were kind of hoping that we could do that without anyone noticing, but that's not how the world works. And so I just wrote a response saying we're committed to this, we're committed to improving it, we're committed to making it better, and and we have been. And right now the numbers are all great. Like all of our quality and retention numbers are always higher than they've ever been. But it took a concerted effort to do it, and it sucked. But you had to do it, and I think we're a stronger company because we went through that. One thing that was actually worked much better than I thought is I was a little bit afraid that telling engineers and designers, hey, we're going to spend 6 to 9 months, which is what we said. We said we're going to spend the next 6 to 9 months looking inward. We're going to stop focusing on how many new users we're getting, and we're going to focus entirely on making the experience better for existing users. Which is why we almost missed the 100 million announcement. Like we really haven't really been paying that much attention, and so like it almost like somebody caught it. Like, hey, this is going to happen in the next couple of days. We should like make a blog post.
Yeah, we hit 100 million revenue. We didn't even notice. So yeah,
see, exactly,
yeah, same
same sort of thing.
Yeah.
We'll notice when that happens. That'll be soon, actually. I hope. But I thought that when I told that to engineers and to designers, like, hey, we're not going to work on like the shiny new things for a while. I thought that'd be pretty demotivating because I kind of assumed that people like working on shiny new things much more than like fixing bugs, and I was actually totally wrong because like again, since we're making it for ourselves, we are the users. Like I've never seen people be so happy and motivated to just fix bugs because like all of the developers know where the bugs are, they know what they're embarrassed about, and they haven't had time because we were like on this constant death march for new stuff. They haven't had time to fix it, and like we've literally never had a happier or more productive design or development organization that we've had in the past 6 months, where basically all we're doing is improving quality. And like that was a big lesson for me. I was totally worried that it would be the opposite, and it hasn't been.
That's a great story. I think a lot of people would probably love to see that in their company. So let me open up for a few questions from the audience. Do we have the microphone people? Mic people? My peeps? So we can actually just shout out the questions. That's totally fine. Yeah, great. Go ahead. Right there.
Did it change the cadence of your agile process if you now want to put out a higher quality product and not have to go through that, put the outward looking features on hold while we focus inside again?
Yeah, I think this is cyclical. I wrote that response on the blog post of the Kincaid article, and that did change the tone of the conversation, and I started getting mostly very positive feedback about it, which my goal there was not to like make an example of how to respond to criticism. My goal is to have a product that people don't criticize fairly and correctly. But even some of the positive comments about my response, there was some snarkiness where people said, well, I'm glad you finally realized that it's always more important to take care of your existing users and look for new users. And there's a lot of things like that. And again, I'm not going to quibble with that because I understand about arguing on the internet. But that's not actually literally true, right? It isn't always the best thing. Like, we could have done this 2 years ago. We could have focused entirely 2 years ago on making a great experience for existing users, and no one would have heard of Evernote. So, like, 2 years ago, it wasn't the right thing. And 2 years from now, it may or may not be the right thing. So it is cyclical. Like, companies do have to go through these cycles where sometimes you're looking inward and sometimes you're looking up. And you just have to recognize what those cycles are. And I think we're kind of coming close to the end of not doing anything new. I think we've had about 6 months of real quality improvements. The quality's moved forward really significantly. And we're just now starting to be expansive again and rolling out some new things. So we've got some pretty ambitious new stuff towards the end of the year. So I don't think it's going to, like, it's not like it's going to permanently slow down what we do, but I do think now we all have this awareness that it is cyclical. But also, I'm super happy to learn that when you tell engineers and developers, hey, don't work on new stuff, just fix bugs for 6 months, that actually makes them really motivated and they work harder than ever. I didn't know that before because we had never actually taken the plunge to do that.
That's great. Next question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say a shout out. I'm a huge fan of Evernote. It's changed my life, and I just want everybody to applaud you for who believe the same thing as I do. There we go.
Well, thank you very much.
That's awesome. Great.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Hi, you were speaking about culture earlier, and for a product-focused company or startup, how do you incentivize the engineers and product team over here?
Oh, hey. Sorry.
How do you incentivize the engineers and product team to really buy into the customer success culture at a product-focused company?
I think the best thing is to make the customers just really, appealing. Tell their story in a way that motivates people. And the same way that we would do a customer success story in an effort to sell more stuff to other customers, we do it in an effort to humanize those customers to our internal, developers and designers and employees, and have them feel good about solving these issues. So we really go out of our way to help customers that are successful with Evernote tell their story. Primarily because that's what motivates. I can stand up at the all hands and I can show this video from my favorite Peking duck restaurant in Beijing called Da Dong. Uses Evernote Business and they're super happy with it, and that's very cool, and that actually makes the engineers and the designers see that this is a real thing. So we're kind of selective about which customers we use. We want them to be the kinds of stories that appeal to engineers and designers, and we just want everyone that works at Evernote to see that the work they do has an immediate impact on real people who are actually like nice, pleasant people that you care about and you want them to succeed. And it works reasonably well.
Awesome. Next question.
So you talked a lot about criticism being actually extremely valuable, and that customer managers are about fixing the product. Can you talk more about the process of analyzing the criticism and floating to the top what is the most productive thing to bring internally to the development team?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and actually we're making some changes to the entire company, which we haven't rolled out fully yet, but we're really trying to think through. One thing that I want to do is basically I want to tell everyone, but I need to make this real. Like, this isn't just a slogan. I want to tell everyone that everyone is in the product organization. Like, right now we have a product group and we have other groups, but I'm kind of thinking that that's not the right split, that the entire company is the product group. There isn't anyone who works in the company, regardless of your position, whose primary job isn't making the product better. Like, everyone's primary job is making the product better. And their secondary job is whatever their title says. But their primary job is always making the product better, just because that's what's scalable, right? Because if all 370 of us make the product a little bit better, then we get far more scale than if that's only seen as the job of the designers or the developers. And so we have weekly all hands meetings where we talk about this. We do internal betas all the time, but it's a difficult process. And the first thing we encourage people to do is we encourage a lot of the harshest criticism to come from inside the company. We tell people, like, look, you should be using all of our stuff. You shouldn't be using our products for dog fooding reasons. I've always hated that. I hate that expression, that eat your own dog food, for the very simple reason, which is dogs don't make dog food. It's like, I don't understand what eat your own dog food is supposed to mean. But we have to use our own products because I want, like, if there's something in our products that we're not using, I want to know exactly why and I want to fix it. So that's the first criticism. But then we just filter through everything else. So we read everything on Twitter, we read everything on Facebook, we read all the comments, and the way that we read these things, the way that we kind of train people to read them is, okay, you read some criticism. The first thing you do is you de-emotionalize it. The next thing you do is you put aside all of the swearing, and you put aside the proposed solution, and you try to figure out why is this person unhappy? What is the thing that's causing them pain? And then, like, once you've understood that, you say, well, then maybe you look at their proposed solution or whatever, and you see if that makes sense. But really, you try to understand the pain. And like the first time this happened was maybe not the first time, but at the time I remember is right before we launched Evernote in closed beta for the first time, the night before. I realized that we didn't have a video, and so I just made a video at like 3 a.m. I made a video on my Mac, with ScreenFlow, just walking through the product and talking because I thought we should have a video on the website. And we put the video up the next day, and we launched the product. And that video, it stayed up on our site for a while. It got like 1 million, YouTube hits. And the very first comment on that video on YouTube, the very first comment was, "The person who did the voiceover on this video should be found and beaten to death." And I remember seeing that, and I remember going like, I disagree. I disagree with the proposed solution. I don't feel like I ought to be beaten to death. But, de-emotionalize, ignore the proposed solution. What's the core of the problem? The core of the problem is my voiceover sucked. Like, my narration sucked. Like, yeah, you know what? That's a legitimate problem. We fixed it. So, like, even in, internet troll death threats, there's a useful nugget of actual criticism if you're willing to take the time to look for it.
We all just learned something there.
Hi, just a question. It's really fun to toot your horn about and send external communication about fun new features and the big shiny things that come and roll out. But when you do your 6 to 9 month bug bashing, how do you let your customers know that externally? Like, hey, that thing that sucked, it doesn't suck so much anymore. What do you say in that?
I mean, our customers are happy about that. So we've actually done like post announcements saying like, hey, sync is now 4 times faster and things of that type. So yeah, I mean that's not a bad message. I think people appreciate that, and yeah, I think we've been talking about that, and so we still talk about new features. We haven't launched anything new in a while. We actually did our first major new thing was about a week ago, where we did the partnership with LinkedIn around business card scanning, which was pretty great. And then today, I think we announced presentation mode, which is another new feature. So we're now just getting back into the swing of new stuff. But yeah, we spent about 6 months, not talking about new stuff too much. In fact, we pulled a few announcements that we were going to have because we didn't want to talk about new stuff during this time period, because we kind of said, look, let's keep the focus on quality improvements. Yeah, it's fine. It actually made us realize something, which is we've been really good at talking about new features, but we haven't been good at at reinforcing existing things. So the problem with talking about new features is if you happen to be paying attention, when we release a new feature, you know about that feature. But if you became a user 6 months after, you don't know about it because it's not new to us, and so we don't talk about it. And so it forced us to be a lot better at talking about useful features, talking about use cases that aren't new, but they're always new to somebody, and talking about that in the product, because that's the only place where we know people are. So while we've been focusing on quality improvements, we've also been spending a lot of time thinking about, okay, how do we talk about things that we may have released 2.5 years ago, but just we know through usage that most people don't know about it, but we also know through usage that the people who do know about it love it. So we can tell the difference between a crappy feature because no one uses it, and a feature that's just not known enough because relatively few people use it, but the ones that do are super valuable. And when we find features that maybe only 5% of the user base are using it, but those 5% are really loving it and using it all the time, then maybe we just try to, expand that from 5% to 20%. And it has nothing to do with what's new. It really has to do with like what's there.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question. Any more in the audience? Oh, there you go. Great.
So it's clear that you've articulated a pretty big passion for the product and product improvement and focusing on the roadmap. It's also clear that you probably accept and filter and respond to critical feedback better than most of us. So that's great. My question is really around do you take any telemetry out of the product or the platform to help drive that roadmap for the product improvement as well?
Yeah, definitely. Telemetry is a good word. I vow to say telemetry 3 more times today. I don't think I've said it in like years, so it's good.
That's what happens when you hang out with us, by the way.
It's cool.
Yeah, exactly. We talk telemetry all the time.
It's cool. When I was in high school, I decided I would organize my life around 3 phrases that I wanted to. I said, I want to increase the odds of saying these 3 things in normal conversation and meaning them. So like I'm going to structure my life so that I'm more likely to say these 3 phrases. And the 3 phrases that I picked were, set the controls for the heart of the sun. Fire the explosive bolts. And I'm going to spend the next week working out of the Tokyo office. It was like, because when I was in high school, like all 3 of those things seemed like equally like exotic James Bond things, and so I got to say, in all seriousness, I'm going to spend the next week working out of the Tokyo office. A few years ago, after we had a Tokyo office, and I was like, yeah, like 1 down, 2 to go. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. Sorry, telemetry reminded me of that. There are lots of important data points that we get. One of the really big ones is what I just mentioned, which is what are the features that are underused but really highly indexed in terms of value of people who use them. Like that's a particularly strong signal. And we find those, we just prioritize and say why. Like one of those is presentation mode. Like presentation mode is something we now have on Mac and Windows and iOS, and it's fantastically great. Most of you have probably never heard of it, but it's great. Like you should use it. The people who use it love it, use it all the time. It comes up rated very highly. But now we're saying, well, why don't more people use it? Well, it turns out most people don't know about it. Well, why don't they know about it, and so on? It's not always because people don't know about it. Sometimes it's for other reasons. Sometimes it's like it's really hard to use, and so only the people who actually have a real pain point wind up bothering to use it. But generally, like whenever we see a feature that's not used a lot, but where it is used is super valuable, like there's always an interesting story there, and we can usually do something to improve it. Other data points are also valid, but that's a really big one for product design.
It's great. Wow, what a great talk. This is an awesome way to end. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for Phil. Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you for inviting me.
I really appreciate it. Yeah.